So Prime Minister Mark Carney ended up going to Edmonton. He recently just came back from Europe after getting sworn in, threatening more tariffs on Trump, not really cutting the carbon tax, doing that whole gimmick, and flew over to Europe. So now he's back from Europe. He's now in Edmonton, and he's speaking directly to Danielle Smith. So Mark Carney says, I met with Premier Smith in my hometown of Edmonton today. Finally, we get confirmation of where he grew up in Canada. We had a detailed and frank discussion about opportunities for Alberta and Canada during this time of crisis. You ever notice that right now is the crisis? You ever notice that before all this, when people were lining up at food banks, when there's a homelessness epidemic, when there's a drug overdose, people are dying of fentanyl, none of that ever got addressed as a crisis, according to these people. But right now, because Trump is involved in the equation, now they're calling it a crisis. And they're not going to result to, solving, combating the domestic problems they're dealing with. No, the crisis is trying to combat Trump, trying to combat a game show host who's just trying to run his country. And that is no support of Donald Trump. That's, there's a lot of qualms there. But anyway, Canada's fighting for our workers and our businesses against unjust U.S. tariffs in a rapidly changing global economy. You know what's unjust is abusing companies and allowing the mass flow of migration, allowing organized crime, allowing these criminal cartels to operate. You know what's unjust? Gaslighting people on why these tariffs exist. Gaslighting people on the fact that you put 270% tariffs on American dairy that also spurred this. That's unjust. That's unjust for the Canadian population. My government is focused on working with provinces and territories, Indigenous peoples, businesses, and labor to build the future with millions of new homes, new energy corridors, new trade routes with reliable partners, and one Canadian economy. We have to be strong as a nation. We have to be stronger when we work together. Recycling the old rhetoric from the COVID days, I guess. We're stronger together. Unite! As we shut everything down and you'll have to lose your job. Unite! So, Mark Carney went to go speak with Danielle Smith, and you know that the federal government and the province of Alberta don't have a really good relationship. We know that the federal government has been abusing Alberta because Alberta has been just trying to demonstrate and trying to coordinate the production of the oil sands and provide energy, gas, crude oil, and natural gas to the rest of the country, and also to export it to grow the GDP. They're trying to grow their economy in the province, and the federal government under Justin Trudeau and now Mark Carney are refusing that. So Mark Carney was asked by an Edmonton reporter, will he make the commitment to build pipelines to get Canadian energy to new markets? This comes following the Prime Minister's meeting earlier in the day with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. Do you want to see what he says? Listen.
You met with Premier Smith. She's advocating for the private sector to build pipelines across Canada. What I want to know is, you've said you're open to this kind of development, but can you make a commitment to Canadians and to Albertans that you will fight to get pipelines built?
Yeah.
That you will fight in the way that the industry wants, getting rid of the West Coast tanker ban, reforming C-69. Will you commit to those things?
Yeah, Dave, thank you for the question, David. Look, and I had a meeting with the Premier this morning. I'll be with all the premiers tomorrow for the First Minister's meeting. Let me tell you part of the focus of that meeting, because it goes directly to your question. It's about getting things done. It's about getting, yes, pipelines built across this country so that we can displace imports of foreign oil. It's about building out the energy infrastructure more broadly here in Alberta, which I would add would include projects such as the pathways. It's about building energy corridors and trade corridors, including potentially up from here through to Nunavut. So we have additional deep water ports and opportunities there. And so the commitment is to deliver those projects like those that we agree that are national priorities, and then the federal government, using all of its power, including new legislative powers or new legislation, in order to accelerate delivering those projects. So
he just said that it's a national priority that we use every resource of the federal government to put more in towards building pipelines, that we're going to have new legislation on this. So it sounds like there's wiggle room to this. It sounds like, Justin Trudeau's lunacy of annihilating a huge section of our GDP, a huge section of our economy that comes from energy production. It sounds like things are going to turn around maybe for the better. So here's Danielle Smith tweeting this out. Says, at the request, I met with Prime Minister Mark Carney today. We had a very frank discussion in which I made it clear that Albertans will no longer tolerate the way we've been treated by the federal Liberals for over the past 10 years. I provided a specific list of demands the next Prime Minister, regardless of who that is, must address within the first 6 months of their term to avoid an unprecedented national unity crisis. So right now, because of just how disastrous the relation between the federal government and Alberta is, that Alberta, there's been talks that Alberta might be looking to succeed out of Canada. And same with Saskatchewan. That there's been rumors that they are going to go into, what's the word I'm looking for? They want to be cut out of Canada. I know there's a certain word. Anyway, just like how Quebec did in 1995. I'll get to it. I provided a specific list of demands, Prime Minister. So here's the list here. This includes guaranteeing Alberta full access to oil and gas corridors to the north, east, and west, repealing Bill C-69, aka the No New Pipelines Act, lifting the tanker ban off the BC coast, eliminating the oil and gas emissions cap, which is a production cap, scrapping the so-called clean electricity regulations, ending the prohibition on single-use plastics, abandoning the net zero car mandate, returning oversight of the industrial carbon tax to the provinces, halting the federal censorship of energy companies. So that's what she's trying to negotiate. She comes prepared. This is how Danielle Smith was able to give us a bit of a leadway when Trump was initializing the tariffs. That's why I gave credit to Danielle Smith for doing her homework and having the ability to accurately have and accurately have a argument to place in front of Trump. And Trump agreed to at least push it till February 1st. So it all seems like maybe things are turning around until this. Because let's not forget, Mark Carney, the UN envoy for climate change, the guy who has been pushing net zero through Brookfield and all these other countries have to conform to this policy, while Brookfield is paying for fossil fuel companies overseas. Mark Carney will maintain oil and gas emissions cap, environment minister says. The Liberals introduced draft regulations back in November that require producers to cut emissions of about 1/3 over the next 8 years. And that is coming from a guy who just came back from Europe and wasted 250,000 liters of gasoline emitted to the atmosphere. Just keep that in mind. The guy responsible for combating climate change and lecturing you about net zero wasted in just one trip with him and his wife 250,000 liters of jet fuel that's being emitted to the atmosphere. Just like how Justin Trudeau needs 7 motorcades to appear at a public event. 7! A guy is supposed to be Mr. Green Thumb and cares so much about the planet. The people that are screaming the loudest for this are the absolute hypocrites. So here's even more insight on why Mark Carney is absolutely a diabolical hypocrite when it comes to anything about the environment. So back when he was in Brookfield, reports indicate that during Carney's tenure, Brookfield's agricultural operations in Brazil were associated with significant deforestation in the Cerrado, a biodiverse savanna, with an estimated 9,000 hectares cleared between 2012 and 2021 for soybean production. Brookfield paid and invested for the deforestation of the Amazon to put farm fields. And this is, again, the same people that want to lecture our farmers that they're causing environmental damage. That people that are growing crops and raising cattle or chickens or any agriculture here in this country, they're somehow committing environmental problems through methane, but it's okay to cut down 9,000 hectares of trees for soybean production. Why wouldn't they just grow soybeans in a place that already has farm fields? Why would they need to cut down so many trees to do this? Just like why would they need to cut down so many trees to build a highway? Why can't they just have their climate summit somewhere where it has a highway? Additionally, there are claims that one of Brookfield's farms was linked to attempts to evict an indigenous community from land they claimed as their own. These actions, while not in the Amazon rainforest itself, have raised concerns about indigenous rights and environmental impacts in Brazil. It's worth noting that Brookfield sold these farms in 2021, a move criticized as avoiding responsibility for environmental and social damages, despite Carney's public stance against divesting from environmentally damaging assets without mitigating harm. Mark Carney, the head of Brookfield, bought out parts of Brazil, tore down trees, kicked out indigenous people, then sold those farms the minute someone held him to account. Screwed over a population in Brazil, and this guy wants to jet around and lecture you and me about the importance of protecting the environment. A guy who wants to lecture you and tell you you have to buy an electric vehicle. You can't have a gas stove. You can't do this. You can't do that. You are a waste to the planet. You can't have beef. You can't have chickens. You can't have big agriculture. We got to sell it off so that mass production of goop is served to you. You have to go and eat bugs for the planet. These are the same people. And Carney just now reaffirmed Justin Trudeau's horrendous policy that's going to destroy Alberta and our economy as a whole. So it has nothing to do with the planet. It has nothing to do with the planet other than the fact that this is a globalist central banker that wants to further destruct this country. At the bottom here, without official legal or regulatory rulings, the full extent of Brookfield's impact on indigenous communities, including any potential removals, remains unconfirmed. So they were just allowed to get away with this. And Mark Carney was allowed to be prime minister. Why? Because nobody held account to him. Nobody asked why 2/3 of the Liberal caucus weren't allowed to vote. Nobody asked questions about that. Nobody asked why Ruby Dalla, who was second in line, got immediately kicked out. Nobody asked questions about that. No one's held account towards that. But they just allowed Mark Carney to become prime minister, skipping around, talking about the environment. Oh, we got to do great things for the planet. Realizing that he is the biggest environmental rapist there is. And he's investing money in this. He's capitalizing off the destruction of the planet. So, just remember, Mark Carney also went after steel companies. Remember, Mark Carney said, oh, who uses steel? I don't know anybody that uses steel, except if, you have an appliance, a refrigerator, stove, your car, maybe you have a steel roof, maybe all the electronics, maybe the things we're using right now. All the major necessities of life, they all have steel. Who uses steel these days? Mark Carney wants Canadian steel companies to be punished with carbon taxes, but when he was the boss of Brookfield Asset Management, he owned 49% of a coal terminal that ships steel coke to Chinese steel companies. So, this is a guy who was installed purposely to destroy Canada, destroy its economy, destroy its GDP, destroy its social stability, destroy everything in its path, wipe it off completely. Well, he has spent years and garnered millions of dollars investing in things that could be invested here. Now, I'm not saying that we should have coal plants, but I'm saying that capping our energy production in Alberta and treating them worse than dog shit is not going to help Canada. That further aggression, further demise, further divide of one of the most important provinces in this country. Alberta is responsible for our energy, just like how Saskatchewan is important for our agriculture, just like how Ontario is important for our manufacturing. And Atlantic provinces are important for our fisheries. Same with BC. Like all of our provinces are very important. That's why it's interconnected. That's why it's so vital for us to work as a team. So much for Team Canada. And there it is. Shareholders for I don't even know how to say that. Dalrymple Bay Infrastructure Limited. Look who's the top one. Brookfield Infrastructure Partners, 49.45%, valued at $554 million. That Mark Carney got a whopping investment out of. And now he's the prime minister trying to eliminate that same progress for this country, which is why this is occurring. So, this is a chart here. This is real GDP per capita growth from 2015 to 2024. So almost a decade. They calculated how many countries have grown with their GDP in the past decade. Where are we on this list? Well, you see that little red little square at the bottom that's second to last? That's us. That is us. That is Canada right there at 1.4%, and that's shrinking. We're doing worse than Mexico. We're doing worse than third world nations. That's Canada at the bottom at 1.4%. Over a decade, that's how much our GDP has increased compared to the United States. Compared to Ireland. Ireland's at the top of it with 41.7%. Over a decade, Ireland. And yet, Canada is almost dead last. And with Mark Carney doing these initiatives, it's going to make it worse for our GDP. Because Canada is a very resource-rich nation. Canada has a lot of value to it. And we could be able to be prosperous. We could be able to rise this GDP if we actually act in our best interests, meaning that we invest more in our energy infrastructure and putting pipelines through. And I know people will say, well, pipelines leak and that's causing environmental damage. I understand that. I understand it. At first, I was against the pipelines. But think of this. Think of this. What do you think has more environmental damage? Having a pipeline going from province to province that we can find ways to make it more secure, or shipping a bunch of oil from a foreign country that now has to go on cargo ships, go across the ocean, and then go onto tanker trucks that have to be imported through the rest of the country. What do you think is more environmentally impacting? What do you think is going to cause more emissions? I'd say it's getting the foreign oil as compared to just shipping or crude oil from Alberta over to, say, Saskatchewan, just through a pipeline. And yes, pipelines do leak. Sometimes they explode. That's why we got to invest in ways to prevent that. But we're not going to do that with someone like Mark Carney. We're not going to do that with someone who's deliberately crushing the Canadian economy. Deliberately. Through this horrific policy agenda brought to you by the evil global investors that already profit off fossil fuels. It's not going to go away. They're not going to switch to renewable. It's all about counteracting you. It's all about keeping you controlled because they don't give a damn about the environment. Mark Carney has no interest in actually doing any conservation for nature or the environment whatsoever. And that's proven through his track record.